wouldn't tell you, oh my goodness, fear of snakes. Well, stay right there. I'll be right back. And go out into the world and kill every single snake. And then come back and say, it's safe for you now to enter the world because there are no more snakes. Instead, what I can do is I can give you some strategies to make it so that you can live in a world with snakes. It's one of the reasons that I talk to you guys the way that I talk to you. I give you all sides of issues. But that's because there are people out in the world who do hold the views that I talk about in class. I can't go out into the world and eradicate those views. And the truth is I wouldn't want to, because I don't know if their views are right or wrong. Just because they're controversial, just because they're offensive doesn't mean that they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're right either. What I can do by inoculating you just a little bit is giving you some introduction to those ideas here in this class, so that when you encounter them in the real world, just like when you encounter a serpent in the real world, you'll know how to deal with it.
Depression, and from there, you learn to live with it.
Yes, that last part is really, really important. Sometimes you have things in your life that are not meant to be eradicated from your life. They're meant to be lived with. Like in that case there where you've got depression, sometimes depression is going to be with you for your entire life. There's just nothing that you can do about it in terms of eliminating it from your life, but you can learn how to deal with it in your life. It's like I've talked about in the past with regards to snakes. If any of you guys had a phobia of snakes, and you came to me in a clinical setting, I wouldn't tell you, oh my goodness, fear of snakes. Well, stay right there. I'll be right back. And go out into the world and kill every single snake. And then come back and say, it's safe for you now to enter the world because there are no more snakes. Instead, what I can do is I can give you some strategies to make it so that you can live in a world with snakes. It's one of the reasons that I talk to you guys the way that I talk to you. I give you all sides of issues. And I put them sometimes, I get it, in controversial ways. But that's because there are people out in the world who do hold the views that I talk about in class. I can't go out into the world and eradicate those views. And the truth is I wouldn't want to, because I don't know if their views are right or wrong. Just because they're controversial, just because they're offensive doesn't mean that they're wrong. Doesn't mean they're right either. But I'd have to be a real narcissist to believe that I have the answers to everything, and that everybody who disagrees with me has to be eradicated. But what I can do by inoculating you just a little bit is giving you some introduction to those ideas here in this class, so that when you encounter them in the real world, just like when you encounter a serpent in the real world, you'll know how to deal with it. Now, the same is true with depression. Now, we can treat a lot of depression. But if it's something that you've kind of got with you for your entire life, then you have to learn how to cope with it, how to deal with it, because it's going to come back up eventually. And that's one of the hard things that people with depression struggle with, that you know it's going to come back at some point. And oftentimes it's going to come back just like he describes here. And Jung says that depression is like a woman in black. What's causing it? They don't know. It's mysterious. But it's intriguing also. It's intriguing also. So he said when she shows up, again, it seems like she's showing up unannounced, or you're encountering her someplace. And that's one of the things that's hard for people who don't struggle with depression to understand. When you have depression, it's not necessarily because something is wrong, as it were. It isn't like if you lose your job, that's temporary depression. You find a new job, things turn around, and then your mood reverses as well. Real dark depression comes out of nowhere. Everything in your life can be right. You can have the job you want, you can have the spouse you want, you can have the family you want, you can have the money you want, and yet still you feel this overwhelming sense of melancholy or sadness and hopelessness. And so how do you cure something like that? Well, you don't really cure it. What do? You just quit your job and find another job? No. If the job's not the problem, if the family's not the problem, if the money's not the problem, then there's really nothing that you can do? No. You can you can go through some strategies to try to elevate your mood. Sometimes, if your depression is so dark and so deep, maybe you have to get on some medication to even you out. Because one of the things about depression that people struggle with is you have these really high highs, and all of a sudden, boom, these low lows. That's manic depression, we used to call it. You have maybe there's nothing in your life that's so great, but you feel like everything is great, and you're proclaiming yourself a golden god or whatever, and then maybe 2 minutes later you feel like you're the worst person in the world, and you'll stay down there for a while, and all of a sudden you'll bounce back up, and then you'll bounce back down, and that could happen a couple of times in the course of 24 hours. And it's really hard to be that person. It's also very difficult to be around that person. And so, depression isn't just something that affects the person who's going through it. It affects everybody around that person. And so maybe that's the thing that we have to try to get our heads around. Like if you have depression, you have a duty to do something about it. Not just for yourself, but because of everybody around you. People who love you and care about you. And by the way, you might think, oh, no one loves and cares about me. Are there people in your life who you love and care about and you've never told them that before? Does everybody in your life know how much they mean to you? Probably not. Probably not. And you therefore don't know how much you mean to other people, because we have this wall where we don't just go around, walk up to someone and just go, I want you to know, you mean a lot to me. And that's too bad that we don't do that, because obviously if you do that, the person might be like, well, that's weird, and of course now you're afraid of doing it again. People can't just say, that's awesome, thank you, really internalize it. And so that just isn't something culturally that we do. So the point is just that if you think that you don't matter to somebody, or if you think that you're not a big part of someone's life, just keep in mind that there are people who matter to you, there are big parts of your life who you've never told. And that means there are people who feel that same way about you. And I hope that encourages you. So when you're going through that, you have an obligation not just to yourself, but to them as well. Because if someone cares about you, they hate seeing you go through this. And you might think, no one knows I go through this. No one knows I go through this. I talked before, I have a friend, a longtime friend, who, if you asked him, I remember asking him one time, what do you think people would say about you if I asked them about you? And he was thinking about it, and he just said, they would probably talk about how happy I am, how extroverted and fun-loving I am. And I asked him, what is something that you would want people to know about you? And he thought about it for a good 20, 30 seconds. And he finally said, I'd want them to know how sad I am. He's the complete opposite of what he's presenting in the world. His persona does not match his shadow. He hasn't individuated. He hasn't put both of those things together, because he cares more about people than he cares about himself. And the truth of the matter is he didn't care much about people either, but that he cared even less about himself. But he believed that if he really showed all of these facets of himself, the few people that he did care about wouldn't care about him anymore. And so he couldn't show himself, he thought. But there's nothing that would have endeared him more to his friends than if he had shown that true side of himself. It's just like if you guys have a friend, is there anything that's more endearing to you than when your friend shares something very, very sad with you, or something very intimate with you, or something very vulnerable with you? Because they're telling you with that action that they trust you. And there's almost nothing that's more meaningful to us to have than a person's trust. And so when someone trusts you with something, man, do not betray that. And if you trust somebody else with something, well, you know how you feel after that person betrays your trust. You know that can go away very quickly, and that how you feel and even see that person can change so dramatically. I don't know if it's ever happened to you before where you thought someone betrayed your trust and you just completely turned on them, and later on you found out they didn't actually do it, you were wrong about it. It's still very difficult to get that feeling back of trust. But that's, of course, because of something inside of yourself. You realize that you've reacted in this way. And it's not that they're not trustworthy, it's that you're not trustworthy. You start to despise yourself because you realize, I screwed up, and you project that onto the other person. But really the thing is inside of you, and unless you deal with that, then of course we're going to do what we've always done, and we're going to call it fate. So what I'm saying is you can replace depression with any of those things. What I just described, you thought someone betrayed your trust but they didn't. Anxiety, anger, feelings of a lack of self-worth, lack of self-esteem. All of these things show up, and they just show up, You don't have to make an appointment for them, they just show up in your life. But when they do, don't shoo them away. Invite them in, treat them like a guest, offer them a seat, find out what they want. Because they're coming up at certain times for a reason. You might think like, oh, it just came out of nowhere. Nothing is random, man. Nothing in this universe. If you look at the incredible organization, order, and the music of the universe, nothing is by chance. Or as a rabbi once told me, coincidence is not a kosher word, if you know what that means. So nothing is by chance. These things pop up in your mind at certain times for reasons. Figure out the connection between it. Why am I feeling anxiety at this moment right now? Why am I feeling right now like I'm not good enough? Why am I feeling right now like I'm not smart enough? And what you're going to find is that you are good enough. You really are. You are smart enough. You're not maybe as good and smart as you want to be, but you will be if you want to be. If you don't allow those things to stop you. If you find out what it is that's causing it, now you can deal with the thing. So making the unconscious conscious. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticism, critiques?